Captain Sarah Chen stared at the empty space where New Eden should have been talking to them. The communications array on her ship, Meridian, showed nothing but static. 3 days of silence from a colony that never went quiet. "Run the scan again," she told her sensor officer. Lieutenant Park shook his head. "Same result, Captain. No radio signals, no emergency beacons, no shipping traffic. It's like the whole system just went dead." New Eden was supposed to be humanity's success story out here on the rim. 2.3 million people living on a world that grew food for half the sector. They had schools and hospitals and farms that stretched across 3 continents. Children played in parks while their parents worked the soil that fed distant worlds. The Meridian dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the New Eden system. Sarah had expected to see the usual traffic, cargo ships carrying grain, to the core worlds, passenger liners bringing new families to start fresh lives, maybe a patrol vessel keeping watch over the shipping lanes. Instead, she saw nothing. "Take us in slow," Sarah ordered. "Full sensors." The ship moved deeper into the system, past the outer planets where mining stations should have been working, past the orbital platforms that processed grain into food packages. Everything was dark. "Captain," Park called out, his voice strange. "You need to see this." The main screen showed New Eden itself. Sarah had visited the planet twice before. She remembered green continents and blue oceans, cities that glowed with warm light. At night, orbital stations that sparkled like jewels around the planet. Now she saw a ball of gray glass. "What happened to it?" whispered Communications Officer Martinez. The planet's surface looked like it had been melted and reformed. Where cities once stood, there were now smooth craters of cooled glass. The oceans had boiled away, leaving behind salt flats that reflected sunlight like mirrors. The orbital stations were gone, not destroyed, simply gone, as if they had never existed. "Life signs?" Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. "None," Park replied. "The entire planet has been glassed. Surface temperature is still 300 degrees above normal. Whatever did this happen recently?" Sarah felt cold spreading through her chest. She had friends on New Eden, the Anderson family who ran a farm near the northern city, Dr. Kim who worked at the children's hospital, thousands of people she had met during her supply runs. "Take us into orbit. I want a full scan of the system. Look for anything that might tell us what happened here." The Meridian spent 6 hours searching. They found debris from the orbital stations scattered throughout the system. Pieces of hull metal twisted into impossible shapes, emergency pods that had been crushed like eggs. And in the asteroid belt, something that made Sarah's blood freeze. "Captain, I'm reading massive energy signatures in the debris field. These match Veltar hegemony weapons." The Veltar were one of the most powerful military forces in the galaxy. They controlled dozens of star systems and had technology that could crack planets. But they had never attacked human colonies before. There had been border disputes, but nothing like this. "Are you sure?" Sarah asked. "Positive. These are plasma cannon signatures." "And Captain, there's something else." Park transferred the data to the main screen. Floating in space near what used to be the largest orbital station was a small device. It looked like a standard communications beacon, but it was broadcasting on Galactic Council frequencies. "Bring it aboard. Full quarantine protocols." 20 minutes later, Sarah stood in the ship's secure bay watching a team of technicians examine the beacon. It was definitely Veltar. "Design. Built to survive in space for decades. It's clean," reported Chief Petty Officer Jackson. "No viruses, no weapons, just a simple message repeater." "Play it." The beacon activated with a soft hum. A holographic image appeared, a tall, insect-like creature with 6 legs and mandibles that clicked when it spoke. Sarah recognized the species immediately. "Veltar military caste. Let this serve as reminder to all lesser species," the creature said in perfectly clear standard language. "The Veltar hegemony does not tolerate encroachment upon our territorial claims. This world now bears our mark. Any who would challenge our rightful expansion will face the same fate." The message ended. The hologram faded. Sarah stared at the empty space where it had been, feeling rage build in her chest like a fire. "They killed everyone," Martinez whispered. 2 million people, families, children." "Captain," Park called from his station, "I'm picking up something else. Very faint signal from the outer system." Sarah turned. "What kind of signal?" "Emergency. Beacon, human design. It's almost dead. Maybe a few hours of power left. Put it on screen." The signal was weak and broken, but Sarah could make out enough to understand. It was a distress call from an evacuation ship. The Happy Dreams, a passenger liner that had been converted to carry refugees. "We have 12 survivors. Life. Support failing? Please respond if the voice was young, maybe 16 years old. Sarah had heard that voice before. It belonged to Tommy Chen, a kid who worked part-time at the spaceport. No relation to her, but she remembered him because he always smiled when he helped load cargo. Plot a course. Best possible speed. Captain, if we divert to help them, we'll miss our scheduled check-in with Fleet Command. Sarah looked at her crew. Good people, all of them. People who understood that some things mattered more than schedules. The fleet can wait. Those are children out there. The Meridian found the Happy Dreams drifting dead in space 18 hours later. The ship had been damaged during its escape from New Eden. Hull breaches sealed with emergency patches, engines offline, life support running on backup power. Sarah led the boarding party herself. The ship's corridors were dark and cold. They found the survivors huddled in what used to be the main dining room. 12 children, all under the age of 10, wrapped in blankets and sharing the last of their emergency rations. The oldest was a girl named Lisa, who couldn't have been more than 8. She looked up at Sarah with eyes that had seen too much. "Are you here to help us?" Lisa asked. "Yes," Sarah said, kneeling down. "We're here to help." "The bad aliens came," said a boy with red hair. "They broke everything. Mama told me to get on the ship, but she couldn't come." Sarah felt her hands shake as she helped wrap the children in warm blankets. 12 survivors out of 2.3 million people. 12 children who had watched their world die. As the Meridian prepared to jump to faster-than-light speed, Sarah stood in her cabin recording her report for Fleet Command. She kept her voice steady and professional, but inside she felt something burning that would never go out. The Veltar hegemony had made a mistake. They thought they were sending a message to weak humans who would be too afraid to fight back. They thought killing families and children would make humanity back down. They were wrong. Sarah finished her report and added a personal note for Admiral Kane back on Earth. Just 3 words that she knew he would understand. "Come armed, sir." Ambassador Elena Vasquez walked through the crystal halls of the Galactic Council building on Nexus Prime. Her shoes clicked on the polished floor as she carried the datapad that held evidence of the worst crimes she had ever seen. The Council chamber was huge, with representatives from 47 different species sitting in a great circle. Some breathed oxygen like humans. Others lived in tanks of methane or floated in energy fields. All of them were supposed to work together to keep peace in the galaxy. Elena had been Earth's voice in this chamber for 8 years. She had negotiated trade deals and border agreements. She had helped stop 3 small wars and settle dozens of disputes. Today would be different. "The chair recognizes Ambassador Vasquez of the Terran Federation," announced the council speaker, a floating creature that looked like a jellyfish made of light. Elena stood and activated her presentation. The holographic display showed New Eden as it had been, green and beautiful, with cities full of life. Then it showed New Eden as Captain Chen had found it, a ball of melted glass where nothing could ever live again. Members of the council, Elena began. 3 weeks ago, the Veltar hegemony committed genocide against the human colony of New Eden. 2.3 million civilian men, women, and children were murdered from orbit. This was not a military action. This was the systematic execution of an entire world. The chamber filled with uncomfortable sounds. Some species clicked or hummed when they were nervous. Others released chemical signals that the translation computers turned into concerned whispers. Elena continued her presentation. She showed the energy signatures that proved Veltar weapons had been used. She played the recording from the beacon they had left behind. She showed pictures of the 12 children who had survived, the only witnesses to the death of their world. "This is clearly a violation of the Galactic Convention on Civilian Protection," Elena said. "It demands immediate action from this council." High Commander Zach Thule rose from his section of the chamber. The Veltar representative was 8 feet tall, with 6 insect-like legs and mandibles that made clicking sounds when he talked. His black eyes showed no emotion as he looked down at Elena. "The human ambassador presents incomplete information," Zach Thule said. His voice was translated into perfect standard language, but Elena could hear the clicking underneath. "The world in question was established on territory claimed by the hegemony over 2 centuries ago. These humans were illegal settlers who ignored our warnings to leave." Elena felt her jaw clench. New Eden was established under Treaty 447B, which was approved by this council 12 years ago. The Veltar raised no objections during the 2-year review period. "Treaties with lesser species do not override ancient territorial claims," Zach Thule replied. The hegemony acted within its rights to remove illegal occupants. By killing children? Elena's voice rose, despite her training to stay calm. By glassing an entire planet? The method was efficient, Zakthul said. It sends a clear message to other species who might consider similar illegal actions. The chamber erupted in translated noise. Some representatives expressed shock. Others seemed more concerned about the legal implications. Elena watched their faces and felt her heart sink. They were going to let this slide. The Etherian representative spoke next. The Etherians were energy beings who prided themselves on logical thinking. While the hegemony's actions seem excessive, we must consider the complexity of territorial law. Perhaps a commission could be formed to study the matter. How long would this commission take? Elena asked. Several years, most likely. These matters require careful consideration. Several years, Elena repeated. While the Veltar are free to glass any other human colonies they claim are on their territory. The Korthax representative clicked his claws together. The Korthax were traders who cared more about profit than justice. Ambassador Vasquez. Perhaps the humans could offer compensation to the hegemony for their territorial concerns. A trade agreement might resolve this peacefully. Elena stared at him. You want us to pay the people who murdered our children? Economic solutions often prevent future conflicts, the Korthax replied. High Commander Zakthul's mandibles spread. In what Elena had learned was the Veltar equivalent of a smile. The hegemony is always willing to discuss reasonable compensation for territorial violations. This is insane, Elena said. She looked around the chamber at species she had considered friends and allies. You're talking about paying for genocide. About forming committees while millions of humans live in fear of being the next target. The Drakmari representative stood up. The Drakmari were warriors who usually supported strong action against aggressors. Elena felt a moment of hope. The Drakmari understand the human desire for justice, the representative said. However, military action between council members must be authorized by formal vote. Such authorization requires clear evidence of unprovoked aggression. Clear evidence? Elena activated the display again, showing the melted surface of New Eden. What would you call this? A territorial dispute that escalated beyond acceptable parameters, the Drakmari replied. Regrettable, but not necessarily grounds for council intervention. Elena realized she was shaking. 8 years of working with these people. 8 years of believing they cared about justice and protecting the innocent. Now she understood the truth. You're afraid of them, she said. The Veltar have bigger fleets and better weapons, so you're going to let them get away with murder. The chamber fell silent. No one wanted to admit she was right, but no one could deny it either. The chair will entertain a motion for formal action, the speaker announced. Elena stood straight. The Terran Federation moves for immediate economic sanctions against the Veltar hegemony, pending full investigation of war crimes committed at New Eden. Seconded, said the representative from Kepler Colony, one of the few species that regularly traded with humans. The vote was 38-9 against. Even some of humanity's closest allies voted no or abstained. The motion fails, the speaker announced. The chair will now entertain discussion of forming an investigative committee. Elena had heard enough. She gathered her datapads and walked toward the exit. Behind her, the representatives were already discussing how long the investigation should take and who should lead it. At the door, she turned back one final time. You've just told every aggressor in the galaxy that genocide has no consequences. I hope you can live with what comes next. She left the chamber and walked through the crystal halls toward the human embassy. Her aide was waiting with urgent messages from Earth. Admiral Kane wants to speak with you immediately, the aide said. Priority 1 encryption. Elena walked into her secure office and activated the communication system. Admiral Kane's face appeared on the screen. The old soldier looked tired, but his eyes were sharp and angry. I watched the session, Kane said without greeting. 38-9. They're scared, Marcus. The Veltar have them all intimidated. Fears. A useful tool, Kane replied. Maybe it's time the galaxy learned to fear something else. Elena sat down heavily. What are you thinking? I'm thinking the council just told us we're on our own, so maybe it's time we acted like it. Kane leaned forward. How fast can you get those 12 children to safety? Why? Because in 48 hours I'm going to turn that part of space into a place where nothing with Veltar genes can survive. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. Marcus, you can't be serious. Deadly serious. The politicians had their chance. Now the military gets theirs. The connection ended. Elena sat in her office, staring at the blank screen. Outside her window, she could see ships from dozens of species coming and going from Nexus Prime. A galaxy at peace, governed by law and reason. That peace was about to end, and Elena wasn't sure if she should be terrified or grateful. High Commander Zak Thul stood on the observation deck of his flagship, looking down at the mining world of Kepler 442b. 3 months had passed since the council meeting, and the hegemony had claimed 2 more human colonies. This one had been particularly easy. The humans had actually evacuated most of their people before the hegemony fleet arrived. Weak, Zak Thul clicked to his aide. They run instead of fighting. This proves humans are inferior. The mining world had good deposits of rare metals that the hegemony needed for their expansion. Within a week, Veltar workers would be extracting wealth from the planet while the former human colonists begged for help from the useless Galactic Council. "Commander," his sensor officer called out, "I'm detecting unusual readings at the edge of the system." Zak Thul moved to the bridge of his ship. Around him, 300 Veltar warships hung in orbit above the conquered world. The most powerful fleet the hegemony had ever assembled, equipped with plasma cannons that could melt continents and quantum torpedoes that could crack a planet's core. "What kind of readings?" Zak Thul asked. "Spatial distortions. Very large ones. They're consistent with multiple faster-than-light jumps, but the signatures are strange." "Show me." The main display activated, showing the outer edge of the star system. At first, Zak Thul saw nothing unusual. Space looked empty and dark. Then, the sensors began tracking movement. "By the Great Hive," whispered his aide. Ships were appearing out of faster-than-light travel, dozens of them. Then hundreds. Then thousands. The largest fleet Zak Thul had ever seen was materializing at the edge of his system. "Human ships?" he asked. "Yes, Commander, but these readings don't match any known human designs. The energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases." Zak Thul watched the display with growing concern. Human ships were supposed to be primitive things, chemical rockets and simple energy weapons. The fleet assembling at the edge of the system showed power. Readings that rivaled hegemony dreadnoughts. "How many ships?" he demanded. "Still counting, Commander." "At least 3,000 confirmed contacts, possibly more." 3,000? Zak Thul's mandibles clicked rapidly. "Humans don't have 3,000 warships. Apparently they do now, Commander." At the center of the human fleet, something massive was taking shape. The sensors could barely get readings on it. The thing was the size of a small moon, covered in weapons systems that made hegemony cannons look like toys. "Send a message to the human fleet," Zak Thul ordered. "Remind them this is hegemony space now. They have no authority here." Before his communications officer could respond, every screen on the bridge activated with the same transmission. A human face appeared. An older male with gray hair and scars across his left cheek. His eyes looked like frozen space. "This is Admiral Marcus Kane of the Terran Retribution Fleet," the human said. "You have committed genocide against human civilians. You have ignored diplomatic solutions. You have declared yourselves the enemy of our species. We have come to collect the debt." Zak Thul stepped forward. "I am High Commander Zak Thul of the Veltar Hegemony. You are in violation of Galactic Council law by bringing warships into sovereign territory." Kane's expression didn't change. The Galactic Council had their chance to provide justice. They chose politics instead. "So we've decided to provide our own justice." "This is illegal aggression," Zak Thul protested. "The Council will not tolerate this action. The Council can file a complaint. If they can find anyone left to deliver, it too." Kane leaned forward slightly. "You have 30 minutes to evacuate all non-combatant vessels from this system. After that, anything that remains dies." The transmission ended. Zak Thul stared at the blank screen, his mind racing. 30 minutes was barely enough time to get civilian ships to safe jump distance. "Commander," his aide said quietly, "should we contact the Hegemony Council? Request reinforcements?" "Reinforcements?" Zak Thul looked at the tactical display showing 3,000 human ships. What reinforcements could possibly help against this? He made a decision that would haunt his final moments. "All civilian vessels evacuate immediately. Military vessels prepare for battle. We are the Veltar Hegemony. We do not retreat from inferior species." The next 28 minutes were chaos as hegemony support ships and cargo vessels fled the system. Zak Thul used the time to study the human fleet, looking for weaknesses. What he saw made his blood chill. The human ships were not arranged like any military formation he had ever studied. Instead of the neat lines and defensive clusters that civilized species used, the humans spread their ships in a pattern that looked almost random, like predators surrounding prey. 30 minutes, announced his aide. "Signal the fleet," Zak Thul ordered. "All ships, attack formation. Target their largest vessels first." The hegemony fleet moved forward. 300 of the most advanced warships in the galaxy, armed with weapons that had conquered dozens of worlds. Zakthul felt confidence returning. Humans might have numbers, but the hegemony had superior technology and centuries of military experience. The first exchange of fire taught him how wrong he was. Hegemony plasma cannons lanced out across space, striking human ships with energy that should have vaporized them instantly. Instead, the human vessels absorbed the hits and kept coming. Their shields flickered with strange patterns that seemed to bend the plasma around them. Then the humans fired back. Zakthul had never seen weapons like the ones humanity brought to this battle. Projectiles that moved at significant fractions of light speed, turning mass into devastating energy on impact. Gravitational weapons that reached out and crushed ships like an invisible fist, and something the humans called hellbore cannons that cut through hegemony shields as if they weren't there. But it wasn't just the weapons that horrified him. It was the way humans fought. When a hegemony ship was damaged, it withdrew to safe distance for repairs. When a human ship was damaged, it accelerated toward the nearest hegemony vessel and rammed it. When hegemony ships found themselves outnumbered, they called for support. When human ships found themselves outnumbered, they split up and attacked from multiple directions. "They fight like animals," his aide whispered, watching a burning human destroyer sacrifice itself to position a dreadnought for a killing shot. "No," Zakthul replied, understanding something terrible. "They fight like something that knows death is coming and wants to take as many enemies as possible with them." The battle lasted 6 hours. At the end, 300 hegemony warships had been reduced to floating wreckage. The human fleet had lost perhaps 200 ships, but they still had thousands left. Zakthul's flagship was crippled, life support failing, most of his crew dead. The human admiral's face appeared on his screen one final time. "Your species had a saying," Kane said calmly, "about making the punishment fit the crime." The image shifted to show the ruins of New Eden. "You turned a world of farmers and families into glass, so we're going to do the same to every world you've claimed in the last century. Starting here." "You cannot," Zakthul protested. "The Galactic Council." "The Galactic Council told us to handle this ourselves," Kane interrupted. "So we are." Through his ship's failing sensors, Zakthul watched the human fleet position itself above Kepler 442b. He expected them to use the same plasma bombardment that the hegemony favored. Instead, they dropped something else entirely. The humans called them Genesis bombs. They didn't just destroy, they remade. Zakthul watched in fascination and horror as the planet's surface was transformed. Where hegemony mining equipment had scarred the land, gardens began to grow. Where industrial cities had polluted the air, crystal monuments rose from the ground. The monuments were covered in writing in dozens of languages. Even from orbit, Zakthul could read some of them. They were names. Every human who had died at New Eden. Every child who had been murdered from space. Every family that had been vaporized by hegemony weapons. "This is not conquest," Kane's voice said over the communications channel. "This is remembrance. Every world you've taken will become a memorial to the people you killed, and every species in the galaxy will know what happens to those who murder human children." Zakthul's ship finally lost power. As emergency lighting flickered and died around him, he realized the truth that would have saved his species if he had understood it sooner. Humans didn't just wage war, they waged extinction. The news of the Kepler 442b battle spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. In council chambers and military academies, on trade stations and colony worlds, species that had never heard of humans before began learning their names. Admiral Kane stood in the command center of the TNS Retribution, watching status reports flow in from across human space. The massive ship hung in orbit above what had once been the hegemony's sector capital. Below them, another memorial garden was taking shape where a Veltar military base had stood just hours before. "Admiral," reported Captain Torres from the communication station, "we're receiving surrender requests from 47 hegemony worlds. They're asking for terms." "What terms?" Kane asked, without turning from the tactical display. "They want to know if they can keep their civilian populations safe in exchange for military surrender." Kane was quiet for a long moment. Around him, the command center hummed with activity as human fleets systematically dismantled the Veltar hegemony. Not conquered, dismantled. Every military installation destroyed. Every weapon factory turned into gardens. Every monument to hegemony glory replaced with memorials to their victims. "Tell them there are no terms," Kane finally said. "Military forces surrender unconditionally or they die. civilian populations will be relocated to worlds that can support their species. They'll be treated according to the same laws they ignored when they killed our people. Sir, some of the hegemony commanders are threatening to execute human prisoners if we don't negotiate. Kane turned, his scarred face showing no emotion. How many human prisoners do they have? Intelligence estimates maybe 200 across, all hegemony worlds. And how many Veltar civilians are we currently protecting? Kane asked. Torres checked his datapad. Approximately 50 million, sir. Send this message to every hegemony commander holding human prisoners, Kane said. For every human they execute, we will stop protecting 10,000 of their civilians. They can do the math. The message was sent. Within 6 hours, all human prisoners had been released, but Kane's attention was already moving beyond the dying. Hegemony. The real challenge was what came next. Captain Torres, signal the fleet. I want status reports from all sector commanders. The main display lit up with a map of known space. Red dots marked former hegemony worlds that were now under human control. Blue dots showed the positions of human fleets throughout the galaxy. There were a lot of blue dots. Admiral, Torres said carefully, the Galactic Council is requesting an immediate meeting. They want to discuss what they're calling humanity's expansion beyond acceptable parameters. Kane almost smiled. They're worried we're going to do, to them, what we did to the hegemony. Are we, sir? That depends entirely on them. Kane pointed to a cluster of red dots near the galactic core. The hegemony controlled 48 worlds. They had mining operations on 60 more, industrial, complexes on 30. All of it built with slave labor from the species they conquered. He gestured, and the display zoomed in on specific worlds. We found prison camps holding millions of civilians from 12 different species, forced labor facilities where entire populations were worked to death, breeding programs designed to create better slaves. Torres looked sick. My God. The hegemony wasn't just an aggressive military power, Kane continued. They were running the largest slavery operation in galactic history, and the Council knew about it. How could they know and do nothing? Because the hegemony was useful. They kept smaller species in line through fear. They provided cheap labor and resources. The Council members told themselves it was necessary for galactic stability. Kane pulled up another set of data. Communication records between hegemony worlds and Council species. Look at this. Trade agreements with the Korthax for slaves disguised as agricultural workers. Military cooperation treaties with 3 other species. Even the peace-loving Etherians were buying hegemony prisoners for their deep space mining operations. The command center fell silent as the crew absorbed what they were seeing. Sir, Torres asked quietly, what are we going to do about it? Kane was quiet for several minutes, studying the data. When he spoke, his voice was calm but carried a weight that made everyone listen. We're going to give the galaxy a choice. They can police themselves or we'll do it for them. He activated the fleet communications system. Every human ship in space would hear this message. All fleet commanders, this is Admiral Kane. Operation Righteous Fury is now complete. The Veltar hegemony no longer exists as a military threat. We have achieved our primary objective of bringing justice for New Eden. Kane paused, looking out at the stars through the command center's main window. However, our investigation has revealed that the hegemony's crimes extended far beyond the murder of human civilians. We have discovered evidence of systematic slavery, genocide, and war crimes involving dozens of species. Worse, we have evidence that members of the Galactic Council were aware of these crimes and chose to ignore them for political and economic reasons. Another pause. Kane could imagine the effect his words were having on human crews throughout the galaxy. Good people who had joined the military to protect innocent lives. Therefore, I am authorizing Operation Guardian Angel. All fleet commanders will establish monitoring stations in their assigned sectors. Any species that commits genocide, practices slavery, or attacks civilian populations will face immediate military response from Terran forces. We are not conquering the galaxy. We are protecting it. Kane closed the communication channel and turned to Torres. Send a message to Ambassador Vasquez on Nexus Prime. Tell her humanity is ready to discuss our new role in galactic affairs. Torres nodded. Admiral, there's something else. We're getting reports from the Outer Rim. 3 species have already announced they're abolishing slavery in their territories. 2 more are releasing political prisoners. They're calling it humanitarian reforms. Fear is a powerful motivator, Kane replied, but it's not enough by itself. Captain, I want you to prepare a new set of orders for the fleet. Yes, sir. Every human ship will carry humanitarian supplies, medical equipment, food processors, educational materials. When we visit a system to check for violations, we're also going to help any species that needs it. Torres looked confused. Sir? Kane smiled for the first time in months. Terror only works if people believe you're a monster, but protection only works if people believe you care about their welfare. We're going to be both. The species that destroys those who harm innocents, and the species that helps those who need it. A sword and a shield, Torres said, understanding. Exactly. And every species in the galaxy is going to have to choose which side of humanity they want to see. Kane looked back at the tactical display showing human fleets positioned throughout known space. Thousands of ships carrying weapons that could sterilize planets and crews trained to fight wars that ended species, but also carrying doctors and teachers and engineers ready to help build better worlds. Send one more message, Kane said, to every species in the galaxy. From now on, harming innocent civilians is an act of war against humanity. But protecting them makes you our ally. Choose wisely. The message went out on all frequencies, translated into every known language. Within hours, it was being broadcast on every world in civilized space. The galaxy had been given its choice. Now, humanity would see what kind of universe they were going to build. 6 months after the destruction of the Veltar hegemony, Ambassador Elena Vasquez walked through the same crystal halls of the Galactic Council building. But everything had changed. The halls were quieter now. Many species had recalled their ambassadors, claiming urgent business on their homeworlds. Elena knew the truth. They were terrified of saying the wrong thing in front of the humans. The council chamber looked different too. Where once 47 species had gathered, now only 23 remained. The Veltar section sat empty, their chairs removed entirely. Other sections showed signs of hasty departure, abandoned translation equipment and unfinished diplomatic documents. The chair recognizes Ambassador Vasquez of the Terran Federation, the speaker announced. The floating jellyfish creature seemed smaller somehow, its light dimmer than Elena remembered. Elena stood at the central podium and looked around the chamber. 6 months ago, these same representatives had voted against helping human children. Today they watched her with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. Members of the council, Elena began. I've been asked to address concerns about humanity's recent actions in the former hegemony territories. The Korthax representative clicked, his claws nervously. Ambassador, the Korthax Consortium wishes to express gratitude for humanity's intervention in the slavery trade. We had no idea the hegemony was using our shipping contracts to transport prisoners. Elena smiled coldly. Of course you didn't. The contracts you signed specifically referred to agricultural workers and industrial volunteers. You never asked why these workers were shipped in prison transports and never paid wages. The Korthax representative's shell changed color, a sign of extreme embarrassment. There may have been oversights in our verification procedures. Oversights, Elena repeated. 40,000 people died in your mines last year alone, but I'm sure those were just oversights too. Uncomfortable sounds filled the chamber. Elena had learned that fear made species more honest than diplomacy ever had. The Etherian representative spoke next. Ambassador Vasquez, the Etherian Collective acknowledges errors in our past associations. We have since terminated all agreements with entities involved in forced labor. However, we must address the larger concern, humanity's unilateral assumption of police powers throughout the galaxy. Unilateral? Elena asked. We gave this council the chance to handle the hegemony. Legally, you voted against action by a margin of 38-9. You told us to handle the problem ourselves. That was not authorization for permanent military occupation, protested the Drakmari representative. Elena activated a holographic display. It showed a map of the galaxy with human fleet positions marked in blue. We're not occupying anything. We're monitoring. There's a difference. What difference? Demanded the Vorthon ambassador, one of the few species that still openly opposed human actions. Occupation means we control your governments and economies. Monitoring means we watch for crimes against civilian populations. Elena's voice hardened. Unless you're planning to commit such crimes, our presence shouldn't concern you. The Vorthon ambassador stood up, his forearms waving angrily. This is tyranny. You cannot simply declare yourselves the galaxy's police force. Elena looked at him calmly. We're not declaring anything. We're stating facts. You failed to protect innocent people, so we built the means to protect them ourselves. You allowed genocide to go unpunished, so we developed the capability to make it extinct. She gestured, and the display changed to show current human fleet positions. Hundreds of task forces scattered throughout known space, each capable of sterilizing entire star systems. This is not conquest, Elena continued. This is a promise. Touch civilians and we will find you. Commit genocide and we will erase you. So completely that your species will become a cautionary tale told by civilizations that haven't evolved yet. The chamber fell silent. Elena could see the calculations running behind alien eyes. Species that had built their power on fear were now experiencing it themselves. However, Elena said, her tone softening slightly, humanity is not interested in ruling through terror alone. We prefer cooperation. She activated a new display showing human humanitarian missions throughout the galaxy. In the past 6 months, human medical teams have provided aid to 47 worlds. Our engineers have helped build hospitals and schools on 32 planets. Our teachers are working with 16 species to establish educational programs for former slaves. The Centauran representative raised a tentacle. Ambassador, the Centauran Republic has greatly benefited from human assistance in rebuilding our colony worlds. We would like to propose formal alliance status. Alliance implies mutual defense obligations, Elena replied. Are you prepared to help humanity protect innocent lives throughout the galaxy? Yes, the Centaurans said immediately. Our fleet is at your disposal for humanitarian missions. Similar offers came from 8 other species. Elena accepted them all, knowing that word would spread quickly. Cooperation with humanity brought protection and aid, while opposition brought scrutiny and fear. The Vorthon ambassador tried one last protest. This is still illegal under galactic law. The Council has not authorized human military action. Elena turned to face him directly. Galactic law failed. The Council failed. You had the chance to be our partners in justice, and you chose politics instead. She gestured to the half-empty chamber. Look around you. This is what failure looks like. After the session ended, Elena walked to her office and found Admiral Kane waiting for her. The old soldier looked tired but satisfied. How did they take it? Kane asked. About as well as expected. Protests from the usual suspects, cooperation offers from the smart ones. Elena sat down heavily. Marcus, what have we become? Kane was quiet for a moment. We've become what the galaxy needed us to become. The species that says no more. But at what cost? Half the Council has fled. Trade is disrupted. 3 species are talking about forming their own alliance against us. Let them, Kane said calmly. As long as they don't commit genocide while they're doing it, we have no problem with them. Elena pulled up a report on her screen. The latest intelligence shows that slavery has been abolished in 37 systems since the hegemony fell. 12 species have released political prisoners. 6 have established civilian protection laws. Fear works, Kane observed. But is it sustainable? Can we really police the entire galaxy forever? Kane smiled. We won't have to. Fear teaches the lesson, but eventually species learn to protect innocence because it's the right thing to do. Give it another generation and this will just be how the galaxy works. Elena's communicator chimed with an urgent message. She read it and felt a small smile cross her face. What is it? Kane asked. Remember those 12 children we saved from New Eden? The survivors? Of course. The oldest one, Lisa, just sent her application to the Terran Naval Academy. She wants to help protect other kids like herself. Kane nodded slowly. The next generation of Guardians. Elena stood and walked to her window overlooking Nexus Prime. Outside, she could see ships from dozens of species coming and going. But now, mixed among them, were human vessels, some military ships on patrol, others carrying medical supplies and teachers. You know what the strangest part is? Elena said. The galaxy is more peaceful now than it's been in centuries. Crime rates are down. Wars have stopped. Species are cooperating instead of fighting. Sometimes, Kane replied, peace has to be enforced. A soft chime announced another visitor. Elena's aide entered with a young Drakmari girl who couldn't have been more than 7 years old. The child walked up to Elena and offered her a small flower. Thank you for keeping the monsters away, the girl said in careful standard language. Elena knelt down and accepted the flower. You're welcome, little one. But remember, the best way to keep monsters away is to be brave and kind yourself. The girl nodded solemnly and left with her guardian. Elena watched them go, then turned back to Kane. A generation from now, children, like her, will grow up in a galaxy where genocide is impossible, where slavery is extinct, where the strong protect the weak instead of exploiting them. Kane stood and walked to the window. And they'll wonder why it took so long for someone to make it happen. Elena joined him at the window. Below them, the lights of Nexus Prime sparkled like stars. A galaxy at peace, protected by the species, that had learned the hardest lesson of all. Sometimes, to save innocent lives, you had to be willing to take guilty ones. The galaxy thought it knew what humanity was capable of, Elena said quietly. They thought we were just another aggressive species that could be managed through politics and trade agreements. Kane nodded. They were wrong. Humanity wasn't just a species that could wage war. We were a species that could wage peace and would destroy anything that threatened it. Outside the window, a human patrol ship passed by, escorting a convoy of refugee transports from a recently liberated world. The ship's hull bore the symbol that had become known throughout the galaxy. A sword and shield crossed over a field of stars. The age of unchecked aggression was over. The age of human protection had begun. And for the first time in galactic history, the monsters were the ones who lived in fear.